In this video on the key editor, we're going to take a look at adding editor lanes. And we need to click down here in the bottom left where we have the plus sign and it says Add Editor. Clicking on this gives us a list of parameters to assign to our editor lane. The first four parameters, velocity, MIDI pitch bend, dynamics, and tempo, will be common to all your instruments. However, you won't see any CC values unless you've already used them in that instrument for editing. And CC1 I didn't actually add here. It's related to dynamics, and I'll go into that in more depth when we deal with dynamics in a separate video. So let me just grab the top parameter, velocity, and you can see it opens up thusly. If you decide you don't want the lane, click on the X to close it. Let's go ahead and open up another editor lane. We'll select velocity again. If you want to reassign the parameter you're viewing, click here, and you have that same menu again. If you need something that's not on this list, such as another CC value, go to Add Automation, click, and you can see our CC values 0 through 127 are broken down in increments of 10. So let's say you want CC11. Select CC11, and there it is. Let's go ahead and add another editor. And this time we'll choose Dynamics. And we can add a third one if we like. Let's choose Tempo. And you can see they resize themselves as you add more and more of them. It's pretty much unlimited based on your window space here. You can resize the height of each lane by going to the sweet center spot here, adjusting thusly. As you go forward, you might realize you have a great configuration or configurations that you would like to save for use in other projects. So go down to this button down here, which is your preset menus, and it allows us to initially save the configuration, and the name defaults to the parameters you have, CC11, Dynamics, and Tempo. You can rename it or simply click on OK or Return. And now when we go down here, we'll see we have that in our list. Click out of that, and I'm going to go ahead and close CC11. So now we have a different configuration, and let's save that one just to have two to compare. Save configuration, I'll accept the default name, hitting return on my keyboard, and let's look at this menu again. So we've looked at save configuration. We can replace the configuration. And what that does is it forces the configuration here onto a preset here. So right now we have dynamics and tempo here. Let's go back to my first preset. And by the way, this is how you'll import presets into your project. And you can see we have our three parameters here. Let's go back in, and I'm going to replace the configuration. What's going to happen is the dynamics and tempo configuration is going to be overwritten by this here. Unfortunately, the name doesn't update. But let me go back in. I'm going to import dynamics and tempo, or so I think, and it's exactly the same look. Now, if you decide you don't like something, you can delete a configuration. So clicking on delete, and the dynamics and tempo one is worthless now because it's the same as this, so we'll go ahead and select this and delete that. By the way, it's also possible to have multiple lanes of the same parameter. There's some editing techniques that make sense. One is having two lanes of velocity here. So let's go ahead and do that, and we'll get into that later in another video. Now, we've talked about these tools up here in earlier videos. There are editing tools that we'll get into as we go forward when we're editing these different parameters. I've talked to you about right-click, and you can select a tool. There are also key commands for this. Depending on your platform, Alt or Option, Shift, and then 1 through 5. So if I want the Draw tool, for example, I'm holding down Option and Shift, and the number 2, and you can see it's moved to the Draw tool. Now let me go ahead and do Option Shift 4, and I'll get the Transform tool. And we really won't see the Transform tool until we start making a selection, and then you'll notice your selection is different. That will be explored in a later video. So 1 through 5 across here, the exception is, now of course the percussion editor is always different. Let me go up here, get drum set, everything updates, and remember we have our drumstick tool. So now we have 1 through 6, and number 3 is going to be the drumstick tool. And that's all I'd like to cover. So let's do a quick review. Back to the trombone. We have our Add Editor button. We can add as many editor lanes as we have room for. We have a default list here of these first 4 items, and then you may or may not have CC1 or CC11 in there. You will normally only see the CC values if you've already used such. Let's go ahead and add a lane of CC1. Anytime you want to get rid of an editor lane, simply click on the X. If you like your configuration, you have your presets menu here. You can save the existing configuration. You can replace the configuration. And what it's going to do, it's going to take your working configuration and overwrite it over the one you selected, but doesn't update the name. And you can delete a configuration as well by selecting down here and choosing something from the menu. Let's go back here. And lastly, you can, of course, import a configuration in. Let's go ahead and change our working configuration by clicking on this. And finally, we have key commands for our tool choices, remembering that the percussion editor has an extra tool, the drumstick. Here we have 1 through 5. Percussion Editor has 1 through 6, and it would be with Option or Alt, depending on your platform, the Shift key, and then the numbers 1 through 5 or 1 through 6. So that's a wrap. As always, thanks for watching. Hope this gives you a tip or trick or two, and we'll catch you on the next video for the Key Editor.